Hello and welcome back to the SSCAIT weekly broadcast. I am Nightcat and I'll be your host for this week. So starting off, we have a recommended game that was posted to the Replays channel on the Discord. Between Banana Brain spawning as the light blue Protoss up at the top of Destination here, going up against the Reaver, the red Protoss, spawning at the bottom start location. Destination is a two-player map, so both players know where each other are, but they're still going to send out that early scout to see what they're both doing. And so from what I have seen written about this game, we should see some exciting skills used, or well, spells, I guess, in StarCraft they're known as. So should be an exciting game. It looks like we've got a gateway first from both of the players here. And actually, we got a 2-gate opener coming from the Reaver. Banana Brain gonna go ahead and get his assimilator, and then we should see a core pop down relatively soon. Could get the one zealot, getting a second zealot for protection, because it does see that there are 2 gateways here, so knows that there may be some early pressure coming. And we'll need to use the choke and the ramp to its advantage. Cybercore is now coming down for the Reaver. Speed this up just a little bit here. Although now the Zealots for Banana Brain are going to go ahead and back off. It looks like they went to just go ahead and check out what was going on. The Reaver said, well, alright, I'll send my Zealots over to you as well. Banana Brain pulling very far back, but now does have a Dragoon that was not engaging in the fight, but now is. Like the prioritization of the probes there by the Reaver. So that is good to see. It knows it can't beat the army, but hey, I can deal some economic damage, so nice targeting there to see. Meanwhile, behind this, the Reaver is getting a forge. But really, I don't know if that's the best move. I mean, you do see a second gateway, so your opponent probably not teching right at the moment, but you are going to need some potential detection. Now, it is getting the cannon, so maybe it's aware of something that I'm not aware of. But I would think that Dark Templar timing wouldn't quite work here with having got a second gate. Now, if you did poke in there and you only saw one gate, then yeah, you know, your opponent's probably teching to something and could very easily be teching to a Citadel of a Dune somewhere. And then ultimately the Templar Archives to get the Dark Templar. However, this also might just be like a generic response in PvP. I'm not exactly sure of how the Reaver is structured, if it's actually responding to what it's seen from its opponent, or if it just goes, well, this is what I do in this build. So we do have 3 gateways now for the Reaver, getting a 4th gateway, but not really doing anything timing-wise. So kind of doing like a weaker 4-gate build. Typically you would go off of 1 gate and then pile on 3 gateways all at essentially the same time if you were doing a true 4-gate. And you would not have got a forge. So I'm not exactly sure what the Reaver is going for here. We are... whoops. Not resources. And now I cannot get rid of the resources. I might actually have to refresh this, so give me just one moment. Alright, and we are back. So yeah, it did kind of bug out there for a moment with the resources, because as you can see I can open it up now and close it, and I was not able to close it after I had accidentally opened it up there. But now we do have the Reaver trying to push out. May be able to actually push out if it committed, but it just really does not want to commit. Meanwhile, production looks to be off of 3 gateways for Banana Brain, just based on the fact that there are 3 Dragoons being made, and now B-Reaver is expanding. So yes, so B-Reaver kept itself on 3 gateways so that it could expand. Wait. Did I just hear something? That was weird. Sorry, I just had to pause the game because it sounded... Oh, maybe it was actually the this observer building, and it played the cloak sound, but it was like very distinct, as if an Arbiter was in play. And I thought, did I miss a quick Arbiter tech? So sorry about that. So Banana Brain being able to effectively keep Bereaver from coming down this ramp, although the retreat that Banana Brain wants to do across this bridge really doesn't help it when Bereaver starts to push out, and that's why I was thinking Bereaver might be able to, if it committed, push Banana Brain back a bit and be able to at least claim that natural, because if it could push Banana Brain across the bridge here, these two bridges, like even if it's taking losses, it would be really hard for Banana Brain to push back across. And so due to that, you know, Bereaver might be able to give itself some breathing room and be able to actually take that natural. Now we do have a third base coming down for Banana Brain. Looks like it wants to take this back mineral only, while leaving these minerals here. I'm surprised that this probe or another probe is not mining those out currently if it's taking that back base. But with Bereaver squarely, or not squarely, but firmly entrenched in its main, no real need to, I guess, establish that. Bereaver shots, some are getting out, despite all of the chaos that is happening here. And really, this makes me happy I'm watching this in OpenBW, because typically when units stack like this and are trying to unstack themselves is when you get desyncs, I think, with Remaster. So taking out these Reavers might help, because they're getting their shots off. They're taking out some of the Dragoons. The Dragoon's not effectively able to kite because of that bridge. So I think he's going to be able to push this back here. Banana Brain being forced to retreat, and really could have retreated to here and fought across this bridge more, but just really falling back all the way to its natural. Probably would not have been able to hold this position, I don't think, but at least could have stalled this push a bit more, giving yourself a little bit more time and maybe produce a little bit more army. Reinforced meet in the middle. You know, Bereaver's crossing these bridges now. You could use these as a choke point. And the probes that are having to take this long route because these minerals, these blocking minerals, are still here, getting caught out in the open. And really, now we've got to transition to another base that I missed getting put up here, and Bereaver finally able to go ahead and get its natural. Meanwhile, I think its main is all mined out, so it was able to do that just in time. Really, it needed that desperately. Interesting choice of expansion, expanding over there. Right below, essentially like the fourth base for, or what should be, would I think be progressively the fourth base for Protoss on this map at the top. Very Zealot heavy composition, able to get a lot of damage in, soaking up shots so that those Reavers are protected, while at the same time, Banana Brain can't really effectively kite here. These units want to move forward, that I've highlighted, but these units want to move back, and so they're just all gunked up on that bridge. Really just chewing through those Dragoons. And Banana Brain usually has some very beautiful Dragoon micro, but really this terrain is not working for it here. Now Bereaver has noticed that there's this expansion over here. He's going to go ahead and move over here, but it's going to separate its army, which means that these Reavers that don't have shuttles are going to be in a little bit of a vulnerable position. But now Banana Brain with the shuttle Reavers, got to try and do some damage here. The Dragoon count has fallen drastically for Bereaver. I don't think its economy from the two bases it's taken is quite kicked in yet, but the production is starting to ramp up now for it. But when we look at the counts, really the similar army counts. We do have High Templar out now for Banana Brain. We've got some observers out for both. We've got the shuttles, which Bereaver also does not have. But really, the Dragoon count is almost the same. A heavier Zealot composition for Bereaver here. Banana Brain trying to push out across this bridge again, but Bereaver able to take out this third. I'm not sure exactly what these Reavers are wanting to do, but now they're going to fall. They're unprotected, but realistically, they can't. Oh, now we do have a shuttle out for Bereaver. So a shuttle could get away now, or at least one or two Reavers could escape this, but two of them are just going to have to do as much damage as they can while Bereaver rebuilds its army. Now, we do have High Templars out for Bereaver, it looks like. So Templars, storming Templars, interesting choice there. We do have some storms coming down now for the two. Oh, nice storm there, but the army able to separate itself out. So it doesn't take too much damage, but it was a little bit clumped together there, so another nice storm on the shuttle Reavers. That's actually, I think, a pretty decent counter that I never thought of. You know, to the shuttle Reavers, just kind of storming them, like, right when they drop. because the shuttles are all clumped up, the Reavers are all clumped up there, but I don't know if the Reaver has the economy to really produce what it needs to stay alive here. But yeah, because I'm just looking at the army, and it just recently got its bases, but it does have another base over here that's mining. It's got a base over here that's mining, so realistically, I think Bereaver has a good chance at holding what is here right now from Banana Brain off. Banana Brain going heavy Zealot production right now. Looks like we're getting a mix of Templar and Dragoons from Bereaver from its gateways, when meanwhile both are getting up, and now we have Arbiters out for Banana Brain. Well, not out, but being produced. So we'll see some Arbiter tech here soon. I'm just trying to keep an eye on that production and what's going on here. Both trying to move across these bridges here, trying to use the bridges to their advantage with the Templar. But, oh, nice storm there, doing some damage to those Zealots. Now we've got Archons out and soaking up those storms. Now more Archons being formed for Banana Brain, as well as those Templars run out of energy. Now the Archon chasing the shuttles there, and really Bereaver being able to push back Banana Brain's army. Though the Arbiters are almost done. That first one for Banana Brain. I'm just going to keep an eye on that army count for when that's out. But Bereaver able to push Banana Brain's army back here. And really, I'm surprised it has not claimed this space yet. I would think that would be its next. It is claiming this one here, which is a good choice considering the bases that have already been taken. So now, Banana Brain's army a little bit in a disarray. That Arbiter is out now. Just looking, it is getting Stasis Field. So we might see that come into play. The Observer here being forced back a little bit because there's an Observer out and a lot of Dragoons. And a lot of Dragoons falling to the storms, which is just great to see. Good use of that storm. And again, the Dragoons getting caught on those bridges. Even though they're wider in this section, they can still work to your advantage. A nice storm there in response to being attacked from the Dragoons there. Bereaver trying to push on the space that it took out earlier. Which I think is a good choice. If you were going to push, this is probably where you would want to go next. Just, yeah, nice Arbiters just floating there. Looks like it's getting a second Arbiter, so we might start to see Stasis Field dropping out soon. This has the energy for it, but we don't see it yet. There's the Stasis, and it caught the Observer, so the detection there is lost. I wonder if it was targeting that specifically because the Observer was there. It's actually a smart move if it was. And now, plenty of storms, Dragoons falling, and those High Templar, they are gas expensive, but Bereaver has the gas right now to just replace them. So lots of Zealots falling right now. Bereaver's main army over here, doing just tons of damage with those shutterless Reavers still in the mix, and the Templar, which are able to deal damage whether units detected or not. So in a way, they're kind of a good counter to the Arbiters if your Observer is not able to get in there for whatever reason, whether it's stasis or just not, you know, or too risky to get in there because of the Dragoons targeting it. Nice with the Reavers there, taking out like 3 to 4 goons. Another nice storm on the Arbiters. And cloaked Dragoons, and now this base over here is in danger. Really pulled the army back after this was destroyed with fighting over here, and then the army just sneaking over here and taking this out with Banana Brain not able to commit to defending that. And at this point, I think Banana Brain is essentially out of resources, and this game should be in the end for Bereaver. So we'll just go a little bit faster for a moment there. Now we have Carriers out for Bereaver. We do have Dark Archons out for Banana Brain. So we've seen a little bit. I think we've seen everything from the tech tree here. Carrier getting a little out of position, being taken out, but realistically, I don't think that's going to hurt Bereaver here in the end. Bereaver has the whole map. Just looking at its main, you know, pretty good usage of the space there. And so now it's just the smarts, but I'm curious what these Dark Archons are going to do in this match. Just to see if they're going to be able to do something exciting here. Maybe we'll see, oh, nice stasis there, getting a good chunk of the army. There's really not much, though, to feedback, and if there have been any feedbacks, I probably missed them. Whoops, got resources again. Just check it. Yeah, that's, I think, if I remember correctly, Dark Archons come with feedback by default. as their only skill. It looks like Banana Brain did not get to research any of the other skills. And so it looks like this game will fall for, or in favor of B Reaver. As B Reaver does the cleanup here. This was just an excellent game by both sides. There were missteps on both, but in the end, B Reaver just was able to follow up on its execution in such a manner that gave it the win. For our second game of today, we have Quesobot spawning as the purple Terran on the left side of Heartbreak Ridge, going up against Brian Weber spawning as the blue Zerg over on the right side. So Brian Weber and Quesobot, I believe, are around middle of the pack, or like lower middle, I want to say. I could be completely wrong with that, and I apologize if I am off. But I believe that's what this game was essentially advertised as, is a good game between two bots that are not at the top of the ladder, essentially. So, you know, and being a bot author myself, that's something that can be exciting to see, and is, you know, lower bots competing against each other. And with recent changes on the basal ladder, I think you're seeing that a lot more now with the introduction of the different levels or classes, or the proper term is escaping me at the moment, but where you have, or the ranks, that's the word. So you have, you know, the A rank, B rank, S rank, etc. And the algorithm for choosing who your next opponent is, and I'm just blanking out on all kinds of stuff right now, aren't I? But that algorithm for choosing who will be your next opponent skews toward opponents of similar ELO, although not exclusively. And so we do see a reaction, a large overreaction of SCVs being pulled from the mineral line to defend this bunker. However, it's good to see that reaction even in there. Some bots that are lower down on the ladder, you will see them not even send anything, or just send a single SCV, and it can be hard to judge, you know, how much damage output can actually be done. Will my SCVs be targeted and not send more? It is a fine balance to make, and so oftentimes you'll see bots either not react at all, or underreact, or overreact. It's really hard to get the reaction just right. Meanwhile, we do have Brian Weber going one hatch lurker, it looks like. So we'll see how Quesobot is able to deal with that. Right now, no detection, but does have the Academy. So could get a Comsat station, but I don't know if it will in time. Just checking on the research here. Lurker aspect not quite finished, but let's move out here. Catching the army a little too close to the main. Able to push them back, but not taking out any of the Hydras, so they will probably become lurkers, but trying to move a little too close. If they would just sit back, they'll be fine. Please sit back. Calm down. Alright, and so Brian Weber has calmed down now, and yep, there goes the first lurker. Still no Comsat station, so I'm worried about that. Gonna watch that production tab. Oh, okay, it has started, so I'm glad I brought that production tab up to see that. Right as I clicked away, that started up, but could move in and deal some damage though before it finishes, but it does finish, so they will get at least one scan off relatively quickly. A Comsat station starts with 50 energy, and it takes 50 energy to do a scanner sweep, so you would get at least one out in the fight if it had happened immediately. But it looks like Brian Weber is waiting, building up a little bit more of an army, getting a third lurker a bit far away from the army. Still just building units right now. It looks like it is going to transition out of the one hatch lurker by getting a natural. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. You've essentially gone one base lurker without doing anything with it. Terran could move out at this point. I mean, maybe you've got a bit of a contain because they are relying on scanner sweeps. The enemy army is not that sizable, so you could delay and run out the scanner sweeps relatively easy. So perhaps a contain into expanding and transitioning over to macroplate is the better move. The more I talk about it, the more that sounds like the appropriate thing. But I think there was a window where Quesobot, oh, and now we do have a push coming out from Quesobot, and it is just getting destroyed here at this. The Lurker's just getting all of that damage from that little space here. Basically took out all of the Marine medics and just leaving the tanks behind here. For whatever reason, it's like refusing to engage with the tanks, which I find interesting. But really, it's focusing. Now, I missed if these Sunkens were morphed in response to that move out by Queso, just in case. In which case, you know, well, they ended up not being necessary. They were able to hold this back with just the units. You know, that would seem like an appropriate response. Okay, Terran is moving out. Let me turn my creep colonies into sunken colonies, because I might need them. And typically, that's the way you see, you know, TVC kind of play out, is that Zerg kind of sets up a contain for a bit, whether it's with lurkers or, you know, with the Mutalisk threat, and then once Terran feels comfortable enough to move out is when Zerg goes ahead and morphs its defensive structures. But now we do have Queso actually got its army around Brian Weber, so Brian Weber might be in a bit of trouble here. Does not have an army in place to defend, excuse me. But the army just runs right into the 3 Sunkens and gets taken out. Not the best army control. Would have been better to stay back. The army of Brian Weber was able to come back and just kind of, at that point, force the army of Queso to just march into those Sunkens. Now we've got an SCV transfer because Queso going ahead and taking this top expansion for some reason. Maybe doing something like proximity to the main, which if you go by air distance, that is close compared to this, but really by land distance, this is much closer. But because he was able to force Brian Weber's army back, that SCV transfer was able to happen without issue. Brian Weber now does have the Mutalisk Spire, but does not have any Mutalisks out, it looks like. Still just relying on those Lurkers, which are now having to engage with the tanks that don't have Siege Mode, and so able to handle it relatively easily. Siege Mode would desperately help any push from the Terran. Looks like it's doing like an SK style, or not quite SK though, because it does have the tanks. I forget exactly what the style is when you mix tanks into it. I know it is sort of Soul Key-like, but if I remember correctly, Soul Key is just Eminem's science vessels. And running out of scan there, not having the ability to detect those lurkers, and not recognizing that they're there and should retreat because they can't detect them, instead just marching over them and getting wiped out. Brian Weber's looking in a pretty good position here, but Quesobot does have 3 bases, which Brian Weber now is establishing its 3rd base, and it's got rid of that blocking mineral there, so able to more easily transfer its workers, and a bunch of Queso. It's funny, I talk about that and then just realize that Quesobot's workers are not transitioning to this base properly because of this blocking mineral. So that's another skill that needs to be added to your bot if you're developing one eventually, is removing minerals. But you can see just from Quesobot's performance here that it's not doing bad per se, even without that skill. So I know as an early bot developer, you know, I was really encouraged to put my bot on the ladder, even if it wasn't the best. You know, you get tons of feedback that way doing it. And so if you're currently developing and you're not on any of the ladders, if you can at least beat the stock AI, I recommend uploading your bot. Sure, you're going to get lots of losses, but that's how you learn. So back to the game at hand though. Quesobot is expanding more, so while Brian Weber is handling its army better and stopping these pushes from Queso is just expanding, basically unchallenged. What I think is happening here is, if we look at the production tab, the production, the macro for Queso is just enough that he's constantly able. This massive medics might be a problem. I'm not gonna do much there except get slaughtered. But I'm just watching this production tab here, up here at the top left, and Quesobot has been just producing enough to keep pushing Brian Weber back to its natural, but then Brian Weber can't get an army large enough, fast enough to push into Queso to challenge. And also, I think the choice of where Brian Weber seems to be pushing is hurting it. It's not going towards the expansions. It keeps trying to go towards the natural and main. Essentially, like, it's constantly trying to go for a killing blow instead of going for the I'm going to stop your income type of move. But Brian Weber is doing an excellent job of spending its minerals and gas. Now, I haven't been paying much attention. Is that more of a reflection on it just not having a large economy, or actually effectively spending that economy is hard to gauge. And again, we have another unit group here, so unit composition could maybe use some work from Queso. What I suspect might be happening is that when it's choosing what to make, it's not looking at what it's already producing. And so it just says, well, I don't have any medics on the field because this massive medics here just died. And so then it just mass produces medics out of all of its barracks. Meanwhile, we do have Quesobot keeps trying to take this middle, and Brian Weber is denying that, so that's good to see. But I feel like that's more of a product of I'm trying to get to your main and your natural. This is a very nice, large-sized lurker force here, which if Queso would just... Yeah, see here we've got medics coming out now. Meanwhile, there's no ground forces. It really needs to consider what it is currently... And see, now we're getting a mass of fire bats. So I would say, you know, if I was the developer of Queso, that's something that I would probably work on, is for its macro code, for when it's choosing which units it should build, it should consider what am I already producing. So that way you don't get these waves of one unit type after your army gets wiped, or after that particular unit type gets wiped. And I think we would see a stronger performance. The next thing that I would say is siege mode. Now, using a tech, especially one like siege mode, can be tricky. But, you know, if you spend the time to develop it, like these lurkers, they are falling now. They would fall a lot faster with siege mode, though, and you'd suffer a lot less losses because tanks and outrange lurkers in siege mode. It looks like Brian Weber actually wants to take this middle, but he has taken a fourth base here, down below the mineral only, so that's going to help him out. Quesobot, though, running low on minerals. I think that's mostly just a result of its macro, and it looks like it did manage to get those SCVs that were trapped over here actually moved over appropriately to that bottom base finally. A rather strange collection of SCVs happening here. I don't know why they're gathering it, but I don't believe that this has desynced, so it's just kind of chosen that to be its SCV graveyard, I suppose. But this bottom base, meanwhile, I just missed, was getting hit by Quesobot, and does not look like Brian Weber has an army to effectively defend it. Brian Weber is down to one mining base, so I think Queso will ultimately prevail in this fight. And so what I would say is that Brian Weber really needed to expand. It looks like this base, the natural, got hit as well, and I missed that, so apologies. Could have had still 2 mining bases. But Brian Weber really needed to capitalize on expanding and stopping its opponent's expansion instead of constantly trying to go for kill. Now, these drones seem to be panicking a little bit. Looks like they are trying to decide if they need to work or defend or not. But really, you probably should have protected those drones. Trying to use them to defend an expansion like that is not going to gain you anything, especially when the enemy's army is that large. Yeah, at this point, like, running those up to the top right there like it has now would have been the more appropriate thing, and especially you see that army didn't care about those drones. But at this point, I think there's been too much damage done to Brian Weber. Brian Weber was not able to capitalize on the advantages that it had earlier in the game. So I believe this game is going to go for Quesobot. Yeah, Brian Weber at this point, not mining anymore. Remaining very little at this point. Up the natural as Quesobot just targets the main here instead of going for the natural, which is pretty funny. The army's just like, no, I don't want to kill that yet. So we will speed the end of this up, and Quesobot just deciding, you know what, we can be friends. we don't have to exterminate the Zerg entirely. Just, you know, let's cripple their hive structure a little bit, and let's see if this actually comes to a conclusion. There's a lot of Scourge out for some reason. I'm guessing that's in response to the science vessels. Yeah, let's go ahead and speed this up to see if anything significant happens. If Brian Weber is able to maybe make some type of comeback, since Casebot has decided to not eliminate him from the game. Which is another thing, why bot authors tend to not put any, like, GG code into their bot, because, for example, you have a situation like this now. Brian Weber's been allowed to live. You know, had Brian Weber GG'd, it would not have this opportunity to possibly win this game. In a lot of bot tournaments, it's very important to have a very high win percent, where in human tournaments, it's not quite the same, because you usually don't play as huge of a round robin to decide, you know, who's going to be the winner. So situations like this can easily happen, where now Brian Weber can be able to squeak out a win. I don't think that's going to be the case here, but with the way that Casebot has kind of messed up its army control here, it's going to try and take out this middle base here with the minerals that it's natural. Might be able to expand again. Casebot's army, though, has woken up here and should be able to handle the Zerg army pretty well. And now Brian Weber only had that one mineral patch. Now at this point is out of minerals. It seems to have just woken up the beast that is Case's army at this point, but they're just going to destroy that hatchery and then go home. And so now I think at this point, the end of the game is probably just going to be on a timeout. Probably be decided on score. Whoops. I just muted the game sound there for a moment. Unless these units are able to get... Okay, they might actually kill all the Zerg, so... Well played there by both bots showing different strengths and different weaknesses in different areas where they can both improve, but overall a very entertaining and great game. And for our next recommended game, we have Crazio spawning at the top right position of Python, going up against a Rackhammer, who's down at the bottom left position here on Python as the teal Zerg. I forget if I mentioned the color, but Crazio is the purple Terran. I believe that is the Antigans from the campaign, at least in the original. I don't know if that color was reused for Terran in the expansion. So we do have, it looks like, a proxy barracks here going down in the middle. So it is a lot more aligned to the bottom left. So on Python, that's a pretty good position for a proxy. You're really giving yourself like a 2 out of, 3 chance of being closer to your opponent's base than being further away. And realistically, it's not that far from there. So not a bad position for a proxy base, or proxy barracks. We will see how the proxy plays out here. We did have a, not sure the exact timing on the spawning pool, but the spawning pool came down first and then an expansion, and now the Zerglings are out and going to see the proxy barracks here. Going to run past it, which is probably the right thing to do here. Going to chase back those Marines, but you do have to be careful that when more Marines come out, they're not going to come running after you. But now, different small packs of Zerglings are chasing different Marines, and they're doing some good kiting. And now we do have a Marine targeting down that Overlord. That's going to go goodbye, and now it's supply blocked for a little bit. So we're going to see some not production of Zerglings from the Rackhammer for the time being. As Crazio's army is a bit spread out now, trying to keep itself alive and kite the Zerglings, getting a little bit of damage and taking a little bit of damage here, but minimizing the time that they are exposed to the damage of the Zerglings while the cooldown. Also just trying to delay their death as long as possible. So the Zerglings doing a pretty well job of keeping the Marine numbers down. The supply block has been broken by a Rackhammer here. Go ahead and watch the army count here. We've got 17 Zerglings up against the 4 Marines now for Crazio, now 5th Marine. Meanwhile, behind this Crazio, not getting anything else at the moment. Rackhammer getting some Sunkens, which is good to see in case the Marines decide to move aggressively towards its natural, but realistically at this point, only 2 Marines, 1 more now in production. There's a large number of Zerglings. Crazio seems to just kind of be stuck in a loop of... Okay, now we do have Crazio, I was just going to say, a loop of running its Marines away, but now it has transitioned into a something else here where it's getting this factory. It's now getting vultures, which I like because you are dealing with a large number of Zerglings, and it really delayed the Zerglings enough they're just now coming, and you have a finished vulture. So as you micro this right, this is very defensible. You're going to take some damage that you would not otherwise want, but now you've got 2 vultures out, and with the power of AI control, they're able to effectively kite, barely taking any damage. The SCV is working as an excellent shield. 1 vulture was able to fall. That was because it kind of got trapped in with the SCVs and thus was able to be targeted by the Zerglings, but realistically, he's hung on now. I mean, he is getting a Wraith, which I like to see because you're only seeing so far Zerglings. So, you know, if you go air and your opponent has no anti-air, you're going to deal some damage at least. So I'd like to see the Wraith once it's out, which it is. Where is that Wraith? Targeting the Overlords, which is an excellent thing. It's 100 minerals, but now it's targeting the Zerglings. I would have loved to have seen it go straight toward the opponent's base, take out as many Overlords as you can, target drones, you know, do that general harass. But overall, though, still, I mean, it was a good defensive unit because even this response of getting spore colonies, now, okay, my Wraith is less effective in my opponent's base. They still don't have any mobile anti-air, so you can basically keep them contained with the Wraith. And still getting some hits. I thought that was going to become a spore colony. Instead, it was morphed into a sunken, so able to take out some more Overlords who are not protecting themselves with the spore colonies. Scats completely exposed because that is a sunken and not a spore colony. So that's an unfortunate building choice to see. We do have a chain of Zerglings that were coming up through the middle, but going to have to back off now because there is an army there that can meet them and say hi in siege mode. Typically not recommended against pure Zerglings, but was able to do some damage, and the units that were in front of it were able to soak up some damage before the tank was able to unsiege and back off. Now, the grass in the main is going to be a problem here for Iraq Hammer, but I think that's just going to mainly be a slowdown. Realists are out now on the field, so they're going to be able to handle these Wraiths, but still just a lot of damage being dealt to these Overlords. This one just like a hit away from death, but Iraq Hammer's army basically has Crazio pushed back to his natural choke. So siege mode is going to force these Zerglings back a bit, and if Crazio really wants to, he can leapfrog forward a bit, but ultimately, I don't think Iraq Hammer is able to push into this and break it. Just losing too many Zerglings here to this. Now, these are a bit exposed. They could be taking damage from the Mutalisks. These Marines would run up, but really leaving itself a bit exposed. But the Mutalisks now going into the main. Decent turret placement here by Crazio, going to force these Mutalisks back. It's got the back end here protected along with the mineral line. The gas line may be exposed a little bit from this angle, but if you're going that angle, you're really committing because the army can then just surround you. Getting Goliaths out here. The other thing is I'm not sure is these are pretty spread out, so if the Mutalisk cloud was enough, those turrets would fall pretty fast to the Mutalisks. But it looks like Iraq Hammer does not quite have that level of Mutalisk control. A nice splitting of the crowd there to try and avoid the damage from the Valkyrie. It's just really awesome to watch those once they go to spread. And now those 2 Overlords are about to go up, and then now we're supply blocked again for Iraq Hammer. So good job of Crazio supply blocking Iraq Hammer a couple of times here. But it's awesome to watch too, because they spread out like that whenever the Valkyrie is attacking. So it's just excellent to see. Yet they still remain relatively tight, so that way they can very quickly group together. But now the anti-air of Crazio in this push is just, I think, too much for these damaged Mutalisks. Crazio just being able to really push out, not afraid of the Mutalisks harassing any of these bases at this point. Iraq Hammer is taking a third and or not a third, but it's taken a number of bases while I've been watching the army. But this force is going to be a potential problem for Iraq Hammer here, moving forward. Going to be pushing in here to the natural. The Sunkens are there. The And then we're going to get the siege mode, so the sun guns are going to fall. And this might start to be the beginning of the end here. Usually what you would want as Zerg by the time... Now, he does have a hive and he has the Greater Spire. And then what do we got here? This is another hatchery, it looks like. By the time that Terran's ready to push out, you really are wanting a Zerg, especially facing a mech opponent, to be having your hive tech basically in place at that point. You're going to want Defilers. You'll want some Ultralisks, so being able to switch to Ultralisks relatively soon. You're going to need that in order to hold off that push. And unfortunately, our Hammer did not have that tech in time. So Crazy able to take out the natural here. But now these Mutalisks are causing a bit of a problem, but the nice repair by the SCV, or the 2 SCVs that are there. Now, I'm not sure, those Mutalisks could have been, I think, focusing a bit more on the Marines to cut down on them. That looked like enough to one-shot a Marine, but instead, just kind of doing spread out damage. Medics able to heal the Marines. SCVs able to repair the Goliaths that were getting damaged. So this Mutalisk cloud just not being quite as effective as it could. A few Marines suffering there, but ultimately now pushing into the main. A lot of the tech has fallen. I think here we're going to see Crazio win this pretty decisively, but nice play by both of them. A good attempt at cheese there by Crazio, but unfortunately wasn't able to execute it, but the follow-up was still strong. You know, a lot of times you'll see, even with human players, they'll start with cheese. Well, human players in the lower ranks, I guess. You see them start with the cheese, and then when that fails, they swear at you or say not nice things and then exit the game instead of having a good follow-up. So, you know, great to see a bot that's trying to do cheese, follow it up with well solid play. And now I think we're just in the cleanup phase coming up for this expansion here, so we will speed this up a little bit while Crazio cleans up. But excellent play from both bots to see, you know, and we can see a difference in the level of Mutalisk play between, you know, a Zerg like Rackhammer, who's not a bad Zerg at all, and McRave Z. I think that's one of the hardest things to get right, both as a human player and as an AI, is how to effectively use your Mutalisks and how to make appropriate use of them to deal damage when you need to, while keeping your numbers high. You know, Mutalisks are really supposed to be your early game economic. We got a hive again, rebuilt. But they're supposed to be like your economic damagers. You're going to respect this threat so that you don't move out and kill me yet. And in bot world, they tend to not behave that way. So excellent game by both of them. Let's go ahead and jump this time into, since we're out of recommended games, jump into a human versus bot game. And for our final game today, we have a player using the name Liberty up at the top right of Fighting Spirit, spawning as the red Protoss, going up against Crazio, spawning as the brown Terran on the bottom left. And this is a practice match, so the name of the AI is displayed down here. And the human player is still anonymized because you can put any screen name to use into the client when you go to launch a game. So who Liberty is, nobody knows. But we do have here now a gateway being thrown down, so we're seeing one gate opener here from Liberty, while Crazio, meanwhile, is getting what would appear to be its supply depot down below, and a bit of a defensive position here, so making some tight spaces so that way if it has some early zealot aggression, it's going to be able to withstand that relatively well. And we are seeing the cyber core go down for Liberty as well, and it looks like in a bit of a defensively positioned as well, back behind the gateway and next to the simulator with another item going down there. And now it looks like this was a proxy barracks from Crazio, so the Marines are there early and being aggressive. So being forced to go up the ramp and really have to wait for the Dragoon to finish getting a shield battery, which I like. That's going to be what you need here. And Crazio trying to pick off rogues as much as possible. Probably should have focused that Zealot because it was almost dead. Could have killed it before the shield battery finished, but now with the Dragoon going to be able to handle this really well. and the Marines not grasping because of the way that vision works. These units are positioned perfectly, where they are just out of vision of the low ground, but also blocking pathing up to the high ground for Crazio's units. Now with the 2 Dragoons and the Zealot going to go ahead and move out, and it looks like Crazio has not begun to transition out of the proxy barracks yet, but unlike the last game we saw where Crazio did a proxy barracks, we're only seeing 1 proxy barracks instead of 2. So now we have to transition to the factory. So Crazio really just has to get that factory done quick, get some units out to be able to defend itself with its SCVs and Vulture, but now doing some damage coming up here to the main with these Marines, forcing Liberty to really decide, well, what do I want to do with my army? Do I need to fall back into my main? Can I push ahead still with this? Buying time for that factory to finish, getting that machine shop now, so instead of getting that Vulture right away, we're seeing it go for the tanks, and I bet, so we got a tank coming now. Almost did it again. I was afraid. Every time I bring up those resources on accident, I'm afraid they're going to break. But with the proxy barracks taken care of and the Marines cleaned up, we're able to transition into a bit more of a normal Protoss and Terran game. We've got the Protoss going ahead and taking his natural. Crazio was trying, it looked like, to maybe take his natural there, but really left that tank exposed. And the 4 Dragoons, great micro there from the human player. Liberty able to move them around and focus fire on the units to kill them quickly. Nice little play there by Crazio, gunking up the path to the tank, but now the path isn't, and the tank just barely survives with a few life thanks to a repairing SCV. So good try there by Liberty. But now Liberty's going to have to play a bit defensively now. You lost your 4 Dragoons that were being really aggressive, and so now, you can't be as out on the map. But you can go ahead and macro up, get your probes, get some tech. The Terran's really not in a position to push either, so although Crazio is going to try to set up a contain here with its 1 Vulture, 2 Marines, and tank. So now let's see, we do have a Vulture out. Sorry, not a Vulture, a shuttle out, but no Reaver yet. Looks like we were going to go for a Zealot drop on Crazio, but I'm wondering now if we a Zealot. Okay, so we're going for a Reaver drop, but we do have some Zealots here, but we're gonna have to deal with this push now. We do have 1 tank forcing these back a little bit, but dropping the Zealots and the Reaver. Very nicely done. Well executed to go ahead and clean up that army. Meanwhile, Crazio's army is very, very small. We do have now a second factory. We're getting a second machine shop, so that is good to see. But just being really, I would almost argue to say, overly aggressive here. Liberty is just able to keep smacking down, swatting away the units that Crazio is sending up to the front, to the point where Crazio is just not able to build an army that can fight effectively. I mean, you've got 1 tank, 1 Vulture. You don't really want to be engaging the Protoss army with that, but being very aggressive, moving forward even. I'm just really hoping that that is as far as Crazio's army will move. Meanwhile, we do have an observer coming down here, going to get shot down by the turret, but again, the army that was here for Crazio able to be taken out. Gonna lose your barracks now, so you're gonna have to rebuild that before you can get another factory. Losing your engineering base, so now you can't get your turrets anymore until you get it. This time coming up with 2 tanks and 3 Vultures, which Liberty's going to decide he doesn't want to engage. Nice pylon wall with the forge there by Liberty, so that avenue of attack is not as open to Crazio as it could be otherwise. Crazio does have his natural established here, running off of 3 factories it looks like, with 2 machine shops, so a nice surround here by the Terran player. Actually, let's go back just a tiny bit, because I missed that check while I was looking at Crazio's base here, so we'll speed this up just a little bit until... So here's the engagement here. Yep, so you just see the Terran, or the human player rather, Liberty, who I guess is a Terran himself, or him or herself, just move forward and surround those tanks, which is behavior that we've seen some bots do. They do step their Dragoons to the tanks. Usually what you'll see though with bots is as soon as that cooldown is done for those Dragoons, they stop fire and then they continue to move in tanks. Cause that splash damage, when they're shooting at the Dragoons to spill over on tanks. And I think right now we're just seeing a lot of the same. Crazio just keeps coming up, trying to establish some type of contain with too small of a force. And the human player, meanwhile, behind this is just macroing up. We see 5 Dragoons, it looks like, 2 gateways, now a Arbitral Tribunal coming up. So, and now a 4th base being built because Crazio is focusing on this natural choke here. So, realistically speaking, the Liberty is in like great position here, I think, to just come out ahead in this. If he just keeps dealing with this force before it becomes too much to deal with each time. That poor Dragoon kind of got pulled out. It looks like the rally points are maybe a little bit further ahead than Liberty would like. But ultimately, I think Liberty's going to be able to pull this one out. So Crazio looks like maybe deciding to pull back a bit here, seeing the size of the army. But some of the units are still trying to kind of engage, or at least maybe slow down the opponents here. Ooh, very nice Spider Mine there, taking out 4 Dragoons, and then another Spider Mine taking out a 5th, so that was very nice there by Crazio with the Spider Mines. Now we're seeing more heavy Zealot production because we're starting to get ready to push forward. We're getting our Arbiter, which is almost complete at this point, the first Arbiter, so once that's done, or very shortly after that's done, I wouldn't be surprised if we see a larger push mounted by Liberty. I'm not sure Crazio actually, okay, so Crazio is aware of this expansion down here, but not really committing any forces to dealing with it. These Dragoons getting caught out of position on their way down to the bottom. Deal with those Vultures, I believe, that were picking up the probes, and unfortunately seeing 3 of those Dragoons, 2 tanks. But now, the Arbiter is out. Here comes the push into Crazio's army, which is way smaller than it should be at this point. Easily handled by the Protoss player. The Science Vessel, though, is out for Crazio, like the perfect time it joins the army, right when the Arbiter is coming down. So I like to see that timing there. But at this point, I just don't think that Crazio can get the army to deal with the Protoss. You're a 2-base Terran up against a 4-base Protoss, and you just keep throwing small groups of units at the Protoss army, which is not what you want to do. You really want to build your strength up to a critical mass as Terran, and then go ahead and move out to try and get that win. Especially, I could see maybe trying to get that contain early on, especially after the early trade. When you got those 4 Dragoons at the beginning of the game that were in your main, you know, great. That does feel like a good position to try and set up a contain. But once that contain failed the first time, Crazio really should have just pulled back, macroed up on the 2 bases, established its army, then got a 3rd, and maybe around that time pushed out into the Protoss player. But instead we see this where Crazio is just constantly at a smaller army. I mean, the army supply is only 10, where the Protoss army supply is 76. While you want to, as a Protoss player, be up above the Terran, you can only dream of being that high up. And because the army just keeps getting thrown out there and destroyed, wasn't even able to defend its 3rd, and its main is mined out. So Crazio is just stuck on this natural, and this is also great play by the Protoss player too, handling those contains before they get too big, while expending the money that you need on your tech to get your Arbiters and to get your expansion set up so that way you have the whole right side of the map for yourself. Now another fight here in the middle, but only 4 tanks there. 1 was down at the bottom, 3 at the top. They're taken out by the army from 2 different sides. And really, this is just Liberty's game to win at this point. Or to lose, I guess you could say. Not sure exactly what I was trying to say. Here we're going to see a recall, which is something we don't really see bots doing very often. Recall into the main, which really, though, I feel like the army could have just moved forward to win this, and the recall wasn't necessary. But nice recall, and then it followed up by a stasis, so we probably have... Yep, we have the recall and stasis. We don't have the energy crystal, or I forget the exact name of that upgrade researched yet, but... And then this is going to be the game here. The main is falling from the recall. Now we've got the army of the Protoss moving in from the front. This other expansion here that Crazio tried, for some reason there's a command center here that had an add-on. I'm not sure why that was built, but well played here by Liberty, like I said before, to keep that contain from fully forming and becoming something that they could not deal with. and then ultimately just keeping their army count way up while keeping Crazios down. Well played, excellent game. I want to thank everybody that's watching for joining us for this week's cast. I hope everybody stays safe, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.